Alright, today we're going to do the Redfish crack in our natural color. I'm going to start out here with the Daiichi 2546 size 2 and some bright orange thread. I'm going to go ahead and get our thread started. We're just going to do 8 wraps. Again, that's just so we can get our eyes always kind of in the same place. You know, leaves just enough space here at the front so that we can add a Weedguard at the very end. Go ahead and get some X wraps here on our eyes. We're using these hairline dubbing double pupil painted eyes. We're going to get some X wraps, some helicopter wraps, just get these eyes on really secure and make sure they're good and straight. Once those eyes are on straight, we're just going to go ahead and work our thread all the way to the back of the hook. Just like with a lot of other of our patterns, we're going to get some medium Palmer chenille. We're just going to make an egg sac here at the back of the hook. So we got our orange medium Palmer chenille, and we'll just tie it in right on the back. And work our thread back forward so we can just palmer this in. When we palmer this in, we want to just kind of keep our wraps pretty tight, kind of stroke some of the chenille back every time we do a wrap, just so we can kind of get it to build up into a little ball, make it look like a nice little egg sac right on the back of the fly. This fly can be either, just like the Quan, either a shrimp or a crab, however you really want it to look. Does really good on redfish. You also catch trout, snook, sheephead. I haven't tried it on permit or bonefish yet, but you could definitely tie this in a smaller size, like a size 4 or something, and catch bonefish on it. Not as sure on permit with it, but definitely bonefish. We'll cut out our chenille, just kind of wrap back on it. You want to end the chenille right where the hook starts to curve. It's kind of a good stopping point for you. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get some eyes on here, just like a lot of our other patterns. Nothing's really changed up until up to this point. Get some eyes and just get them just so they're extending past the egg sac. Go ahead and get those tied in nice and tight. So we'll get one on this side of the hook, and then we'll do another on the other side of the hook. I'm going to just try to make sure that they're evened up on each side. And that each eye is tied in really tight, so it's not going to go anywhere on you when you start hooking some fish. And we just want to spread each eye out, so we'll just do some wraps on the inside of each eye, 3 or 4 wraps on each side. We'll do plenty just to kind of spread the eyes out. You can see now they're a little bit spread, they're nice and even. And that's exactly what we want. Just add a little durability. We're going to put a little bit of Loctite on here. This is the liquid formula, so it'll sink down into the thread wraps a little bit better for us. Put a couple of thread wraps over that. Pull down tight. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get some pseudo hair. I already prepared some. You're going to want a generous clump and just kind of pick it out, make it even. Same as we've done in a lot of patterns. You know, just kind of pick out the butt sections. You know, just get everything nice and evened up. You can do two tones. You can just do a solid, like this is just solid tan. All we're looking for is just maybe 1.5 to 2 times the length of the shank of the hook off the back here. Go ahead and cut our butt sections that we don't need. And we'll just tie this right in on the back of the hook here. Again, just some nice tight wraps. We don't want this going anywhere on us, so once we tie this in, we'll hit it again with just a little bit of Loctite. Make sure that it's just as durable as possible. The last thing we want to do is having to keep changing flies every time we catch a fish. So, try to trim some of the extra out there. Get a little bit of our Loctite. I like to add it just over where the eyes are, just for a little bit more durability for the eyes. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a little barring on the back of this fly. We're going to use a gold Sharpie. All we're going to do is just add a couple of bars right to the back, so nothing crazy. Kind of just give it a little shrimpy look to it. Like the bars, they just kind of add a little bit of appearance of movement. So now we're going to add our flashing here. We're going to use medium Palmer chenille. We're going to use a pretty good portion of this. I mean, you're gonna want, you know, probably 4 or 5 inches of medium Palmer chenille. This is going to help give our fly some volume, along with add a good bit of flash. A lot of this ends up getting covered up with our next material, which will be the EP brush. So I find the more flash that I add to this, the little bit more that ends up showing through once it's in the water. So go ahead, get our hackle pliers, and we're just going to palmer this forward. Some of these will get a little unruly on you, so you just kind of got to stroke them forward. Normally I let that glue dry a little more, so I got this glue sticking to my fingers. My camera only do 20 minutes of video, so I try to go a little bit quicker than I normally would. So keep palmering to the front here. And if it gets a little unruly on you like that, I mean, it's no big deal. You're gonna tie it all back anyway, so you can get a pretty good way forward here. I'm gonna go ahead and tie that in. Just kind of cut out our excess without hitting our thread. And just stroke everything back, kind of wrap right back on itself. Move our thread just behind the eyes. You see, once you wrap back on it, it all lays right back. No problems whatsoever. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to get our silly legs. These happen to be olive and with orange tip on them. Really, the base color, the olive, you're not going to see it on this pattern. You're just going to really see the orange tips. kind of sticking out at the ends. So just going to go ahead, we're just going to make some little claws on the ends of these just by doing a little overhand knot on each side. Clip off the excess. Do a little overhand knot on this side. Oop. And I broke that one. Let's try that again. I got glue all over my fingers now. Alright. Again. Overhand knot on one side. And we'll do our overhand knot on the other side. Perfect. Then we just kind of fold it in half on our thread. We're going to start these right behind the eye. And we're just going to get one of the claws, work it right down the hook shank on one side. Get it coming all the way back here. Get it going just a little further back. And we'll work our thread back forward and do the same thing on the far side of the hook. So just get it going right down the hook shank all the way back. Just kind of get these eyes, I put them right over the eyes just to kind of lay them back so they're out of my way. Now we can grab our 1-inch EP tarantula brush. This is the brown color. I think this brown really looks really good with the tan back. I mean, once you get this thing in the water, it looks just like a shrimp. Has a lot of volume to it. So all we're gonna do is just tie one end right here, back, work our thread forward, jump over the eyes. Now we're just gonna palmer our brush forward. We're gonna try to get this pretty tight. This is a little bit of a bushier material, so we just want to get it nice tight wraps. Kind of stroke back. Don't worry if you're trapping fibers. We're going to pick those out in a minute. But stroke back as best you can. You're probably going to use about 8 or 9 wraps of these. Each brush should probably get you 2 flies, 2.5 flies, something like that. Depending on what size hook you're using and everything. But you really want to have some nice volume here at the front. Helps push a little water and just helps this pattern not look too thin in the water. Plus you get more of these little rubber legs on there, which is always nice as a little attractant. So those will move around in the water while you got the fly sitting. So between that and the barring on the back, even if your fly is just sitting still, it's still got movement to it. So go ahead and tie this off on the front. I'll just take our bad scissors and cut this out. Kind of just tie right over that little excess wire there. Next thing we're going to do is just get our bodkin, kind of pick out some of these fibers that got trapped. Again, I like to make this head of the fly, or body of the fly, however you want to see it, kind of as bushy as possible. Just kind of fold it back and just kind of tie back on the eyes, and it'll push back a little bit of those fibers on you. And you could finish right here, but we're gonna go ahead and add a Weedguard to this. We're gonna get some 30-pound Mason hard mono. All we're gonna do is cut off a little section. We're gonna mash one of the ends, just a very, very small piece on the end that's getting mashed here, just to give us a little tying point. Oop, there went my alarm. Let's turn that off, because nobody wants to hear an alarm all morning. And all we're going to do is get our thread started right on our little tying point that we mashed down. Just wrap over it nice and tight. And we're going to fold this forward and just throw a bunch of thread wraps behind it. Usually probably 15 or 20 thread wraps. Just kind of pulling forward a little bit as you do each one, and it'll help this Weedguard stand up a little bit better. That looks pretty good. And we'll just measure it off the back, a little bit longer than the point of the hook. And now we can go ahead and whip finish. So get a couple whips thrown right here. Cut our thread out. And we'll just clean up the head a little bit with our lighter. Any straggling fibers or anything. And last but not least, we're going to hit the head with a little bit of Loon Flow. I really like finishing off the heads a lot more with the Loon Flow than I do with the Loon Thin. I think it gets down in the thread wraps better. And overall, I think the durability is a little better. The Loon Thin for me, after a couple of fish, the fish start tearing the thin off of the thread, and then I just feel like the thread's unprotected, as opposed to the flow, which just gets down into the thread, so you can't tear it out. We'll just go ahead and let that soak in for a second, and then hit it with our light. And that's it. That's our redfish crack. Great redfish fly for the flats. The only thing I would say about this fly is do make sure that you tie it with lead eyes. If you try to go with like a bead chain eye, it's just not going to sink for you. I've tied them for people with bead chain. I've warned them that that the fly just has a really hard time sinking with bead chain because you have all this fluff in the fly. So you really want to get lead eyes on this pattern. It'll still, with these small lead eyes, it'll still sink fairly slow. Medium lead eyes seem to be about the best if you want it to have a faster sink rate. So it's more a fly I like to throw in a little bit shallower water because of that reason. But yeah, that's the fly, and if you like it, please subscribe to our channel, and if you haven't already, join our contest on Instagram. We got a bunch of flies and materials that we're giving away, about $100 value, so check that out, and we'll try to have another video for you guys later this week. Thanks a lot.